Thank you. Oh, goodness.
Well, it's 1:01. I think we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Ann Feeney, Executive Assistant for AESA, and I'm so excited to be able to gather the executive assistants and administrative support professionals again. It's been a while since we've all been together. And so I'm going to, first couple of things, I am recording this. So if you want to keep your camera on, you're more than welcome to, or if you don't want to be forever recorded in our history books, you might want to shut your camera off. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll keep an eye on the chat box during Todd's presentation and make sure, or feel free to unmute yourself and just ask away. We want this to be comfortable and casual and conversational, so please do. And Todd, this is Todd Withorn. He works with our business partner, Wonder Health. And I'm going to introduce him now. It's pronounced Withorn, so I say it right. He's a gifted speaker, published author, and an Emmy Award-winning broadcaster. 3 things you should know about Todd. 1, he graduated with honors from UCLA with a degree in kinesiology. 2, he spent over 20 years immersed in the world of personal and corporate health. That's a long time, Todd. Wow.
I'm old, Ann.
I hear you. He serves as a Chief Inspiration Officer. You got to love that title, for Wonder Health. And that's a company that in the past 5 years has positively impacted the lives of over 350,000 people nationwide. Todd has run the Boston Marathon, climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and hiked extensively throughout Patagonia. But his goal today is to help you change the way you feel about your future. I don't know about you all, but and after being beaten up this last year and a half, I'm ready to look to the future and get this over with. So please join me in welcoming Todd Withorn.
Thank you, Ann, very much. Good afternoon, or maybe good morning for a few of you. I know we're spread all over the country. Really honored and excited to spend some time with you today. And Ann, thank you for that introduction and for the opportunity to speak with you guys. I want to start with a big thank you. I do a lot of work with educators, particularly here in Texas. I know we have some of the folks from the service centers throughout the state of Texas on with us today. I'm in Region 10, based in Dallas, but I get it. I'm not necessarily in the game directly, but my daughter-in-law is a 5th grade teacher. My sister-in-law is a pre-K teacher out in Southern California. I have a number of superintendents and principals that are personal friends of mine. So I understand. I truly understand. And I just want to say thank you, because whether you're in the classroom or a part of the support staff, you're in central office or working with the service centers and the regional centers, whatever it is you do, you're positively impacting the lives of other people. And I know it sometimes might not feel like that, but there's a sincere thank you, because I have children and grandchildren that are all products of the public health, or excuse me, the public education system. And I just want to say thanks. I know it's been especially hard. It's never easy, but it's especially hard the past year and a half. So thanks for sharing some time. Ann mentioned that I've hiked in Patagonia. This picture is actually from what's called the Torres del Paine National Park, which is in very southern Chile. It's real close to the South Pole. And my son and I were down there in January and February of 2020. So this was one of the last trips that I really made, one of the last adventures that I was able to make before we got introduced to the concept of pandemics and shutdowns. So you're going to see a number of pictures throughout that trip and some of the other things that I participated in over the years. It's kind of my motivation, my juice, so to speak. And so hopefully some of these pictures will make you, encourage you to kind of get out, breathe some fresh air and get involved. So again, thank you for your time today. My background is pretty extensive in this area and I'm very passionate about it. So, but if you do have any questions, feel free to chime in. And if you would monitor that chat box and feel free to interrupt at any time, because I'm here for you guys today. So here we go. Off and running, he said, with great anticipation. We'll do it this way. And for some reason, that's interesting. Wow. Why would not my screen be advancing? Maybe we're just going to look at one picture today. Is that possible? That is not the way this is supposed to work. Huh. All right. I'm sharing my screen. You see that, right, Ann?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing. And now I see several faces. Hi, everybody. All right. I'm going to come back and try this again. I don't know what, this is kind of the world we live in now, right?
Yep.
You just kind of got to roll with the punches. It's not what happens, but how you handle what happens. All right.
Right. Technology is a great thing when it works.
When it works, yeah. And that is amazing. Huh.
The picture is amazing.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, we're working. Now let's see if
Yeah.
this works. All right. It was just stuck. All right. So let's start with my parents. This is Bill and Mary. Now, Bill's official name, his given name was Washington Curran Whitthorne IV. My mom wanted to name me Washington Curran Whitthorne V. My dad talked her out of it. Thank goodness. So this is Bill and Mary. What's interesting is Bill and Mary were both only children, and Todd is an only child. So I'm an only child of only children, and they, by and large, I believe, had virtually everything to do with my chosen path in life and the things that I do, because my dad was a pilot. He flew in the Navy and later flew commercially for Continental Airlines. My dad, I vividly remember that when he put that uniform on, he came to life. He was absolutely passionate about what he did for a living until my freshman year in college, when he went to get his annual FAA physical. They put him on the treadmill. He had a very unusual treadmill test, and they took him off that treadmill and he was grounded. They took his license away and he would never fly again. He had just recently checked out as captain, which is kind of the epitome of a commercial airline pilot. And I remember, even though he had a pension and he was okay economically, psychologically, he was devastated because they had taken away really what he lived for. That was a really driving part of his life. Now, conversely, my senior year in college, my mom was rushed to the hospital on Mother's Day with excruciating pain in her right thigh. They thought it was sciatica, so they put her in traction. It didn't get better. A week later, they did a CAT scan, and lo and behold, she had stage 3B ovarian cancer, which, as you probably know, is not a positive at all diagnosis. That's a very advanced, aggressive cancer. She had chemo and she had surgery and then chemo and radiation, and then came back and she had the whole thing again. And the last 5-6 years of her life tremendously impacted. She was alive, just like my dad. They were alive, but they weren't really living. They were just hanging on. And I believe this is so important. Now, what's also important to recognize that back then, when my mom and dad were younger, we didn't know right from wrong. They didn't realize the things that we know now, and we all know them. I don't know any of you on this call. I know Ann a little bit, but I can guarantee that you know the things that we should be doing, but the challenge is we're not doing them. So the way they closed out their life, the way they finished what I would call the back nine of their life, has always been a motivator to me, because I didn't want to be able to go through life like they did. So let me show you kind of technically what I'm talking about here. So on the left axis, you see functional capacity, and across the bottom, you see age. Now, most Americans live on this red curve. So that means over on the far left, we reach our functional capacity peak usually in our early to mid 20s. We're the strongest, we're the fittest, we're the healthiest, most vital that we've ever been, and for the most part that we ever will be. And then as time goes on, every year we get a little bit older, we lose a little bit of that functional capacity. We're not quite as strong or vital or healthy as we were the year before. And this is known as a high-risk lifestyle. Most folks that are on that red curve, they're not doing the things that they know they should be doing. And as a result, they end up in this red box down here. Now, that may be 5 years, it may be 10 or 15 or even 20 years. And this is known as deficient survival. This is where my mom and dad ended up. This is what I saw as I was a young adult. And I was like, man, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, the alternative is to hop on this green curve. This is what we call the low risk curve. the low risk lifestyle, doing the things that we all know that we should be doing, some of the things that we'll talk about today, very, very important. And it's that gap between the red and the green that I think is so critical. This is often referred to as exceptional survival. These are people that live long, wonderful lives. They live into their 80s or 90s, and then they die suddenly. They kind of square off that curve, as you can see. Technically, scientifically, this is called the compression of morbidity. Morbidity is just a fancy name for sickness. And so they shorten that window, whereas opposed my folks, they lived in that window for a long period of time. A couple critical takeaways here on this, and this is, by the way, validated by lots and lots of research. Number one is, if you embrace a healthy lifestyle, a low-risk lifestyle, you'll live on average about 7 years longer. That's cool. But more importantly, you will improve your quality of life by up to 30 years. You will extend your options and the things that you love to do, whatever it is, it is. It could be traveling, it could be playing with your kids and your grandkids, it could be gardening, it could be whatever it is, what brings you joy, you're going to be able to do for a much longer period of time statistically. It's also important to recognize that if you're on the red curve, you can get on the green curve. It's never too late. And if you're on the green curve, you can get on the red curve, right? Because our health is our responsibility. That's a really important message today. Out of almost 8 billion people in the world, no one has more impact on your health and your future than you do. So keep that in mind. It's really, really important to recognize that you can't outsource your health. We pay people to do a lot of things, right? They mow our lawn or cook our food or do our income taxes, but you can't outsource your health. You can't get someone to eat for you or sleep for you or be physically active for you. It's all up to you. And that's exciting, primarily because of the statistics that we'll talk about. So these are the big three that we're going to talk about today. Be intentional, connect mind and body, and be resilient. Those are the three. That's going to be kind of the overarching message today. And I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. And I think you'll understand why these are so critical for your future. So let's start with be intentional. By the way, this picture was taken by my nephew when my son and I reached the top of Mount Kilimanjaro back in 2013. That's the highest peak in Africa. It's in Tanzania. It is 19,340 feet. And I will tell you that when I made it to the top, it was an amazing memory and an amazing just experience that I was able to share with my son because I had invested in myself. So these, again, these are examples, I think, of the things that the why, what I call the why, or our purpose in life. So here's the interesting news. About 20% of your health is mom and dad. It's genetic. You're not going to change that. 80% is really up to you. It's based on our environment, our behavior, our lifestyle, the choices that we make day in and day out. The challenge is our environment in the past 30 to 50 years has become extremely challenging. And it's hard for us to be successful to navigate in what has been defined as an obesogenic environment. So we have to overcome that. Again, we're in charge of that. This is really good news, by the way, very, very important. Now, as I mentioned, I was adopted. I think I mentioned that, but so I don't really know a lot about my genetics. And so I have really doubled down on that 80% of what can I do to improve my quality of life, because I can't change genetics, right? We can't change those things, but we can certainly change our lifestyle. Health, by the way, is not a mystery. It's a puzzle. To solve a mystery, you need clues. We've got all, you got to go hunting for clues. Health is not that issue at all. It's really a puzzle. The clues, the puzzle pieces like you have in a jigsaw puzzle, we have all of the puzzle pieces. They're all right there. All we have to do is figure out a way to put them together. So don't expect some sort of miracle magic bullet potion or formula or anything. We know what works. We just have to be able to figure out how to put it all together. So let's do a little exercise. Hopefully you all have a pen and paper available to you. I'd like you in that, some, area off to the side, wherever, draw a horizontal line, and above that line, write down your age, whatever your age is today. Now, above that line, I'd like you to write, if you're a woman, write the number 81. If you're a man, write down the number 76. And then simply subtract the bottom number from the top number, and you're going to get a very, very important number. Circle it right there. Because on average, that's how many years you have left on this earth. I want to reinforce that this is not a dress rehearsal. We get to do this one time. And statistically, based on all of the research, we know how long the average man and woman lives in our country. There you go. There's that number. So I have two questions for you. Is that number accurate for you? Are you going to live, as best as you can guess, more than that or less than that? And number two is, what are you doing to influence it? Really, really important to recognize. Don't look back. Don't trip over things behind you. Don't worry about the past. The future is very, very important. I like to think about the relationship in an automobile between the rear view mirror and the windshield, right? We shouldn't be looking at things behind. We don't drive by looking backwards. We drive by looking forwards. And that's what life is really all about. Now you can look in that rear view mirror occasionally, kind of ground you, get settled a little bit, but really it's looking forward. So from today moving forward, that's what I want to have you really focus on, what it is you want out of the rest of your life. Very, very critical. So first of all, you've got to set very clear and very purposeful goals. A lot of times people think, when I do this for a living, I've talked to literally thousands of people about their health. I've run in-residence wellness programs. This is what I went to college and studied kinesiology. I've written a book on the topic. I've interviewed hundreds of experts. And I truly, truly believe that when we think about health, it shouldn't be the number on the scale. It shouldn't be our blood pressure. It shouldn't be our triglycerides. It should really be, what is it that we want to experience? What do we want to contribute? How do we want to participate in this wonderful opportunity we call life? So we're going to focus on setting very clear, purposeful goals, but you're going to have to do that work because it's really up to you. It's not up to me. What is it that you want? This is 40% of my grandchildren that you're looking at right here. This is Henry and Hudson, and that's me in the middle, out in Southern California when we took a vacation just a couple of years ago. What do you want? I'll tell you what I want. I want to be a participant. I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be involved in their life. I want to be in the game. I want to play with them. I don't want to watch them play, right? So for me, again, when I think about that clear, purposeful goals, how can I be involved? My mom and dad split up when I was in third grade. My dad really wasn't a big part of my life, especially throughout my teenage and early 20s. And so I always wanted to have that kind of connection. And this has been just fantastic. So again, ask yourself the question, do you want to be a spectator? Do you want to be a participant moving forward? And what is it that's important for you? I'd really encourage you to start with an inventory. Start with establishing a relationship, if you don't already have one, with a primary care physician. It could also be a nurse practitioner, it could be a physician's assistant, but have a very direct adult conversation with a healthcare provider. Take an inventory and find out what your baseline is. Don't be surprised. It's very important to really understand what's happening as we get older. Because again, if you're on that red curve, you don't want to be on it very long. You want to hop up to that green curve. So let's get a report card. And I would encourage you to have a conversation with that physician around something called metabolic syndrome. Now, I'm going to show you 5 risk factors. These are all numbers that you should know. And if you don't, then get that fixed. And today, possibly, or tomorrow, schedule a physical. So if 3 or more of these risk factors are out of range, that's a big red flag. That's an indication that something is looming and that metabolically your machine is not operating like it should. And the great news, as I mentioned, we can influence that. So number 1 is blood sugar. If your blood glucose level is greater than 100, that's a yes, check that box. Number 2, triglycerides, that's a blood fat. If they get above 150, again, a warning flag. We'd like to see them less than 100, but if they're above 150, that's definitely a problem. Your HDL or your healthy cholesterol. Ladies normally have higher levels of HDL or that good stuff than do men. But if it's less than 40 in a guy, less than 50 in a woman, that's a concern. 4th on the list is blood pressure. We all know about that. Ideally, kind of perfect target level blood pressure is 120/80. But if it gets above 130/85, according to the definition of metabolic syndrome, it's cause for concern. And last on the list is the waist circumference, greater than 40 inches for a man, greater than 35 inches for a woman. This is right around your midsection. This is sometimes referred to as visceral fat, belly fat, visceral adiposity. It's that truck driver or, kind of that beer gut kind of thing. The reason that's important is because the weight that we carry around our midsection is different than the weight that we carry, for instance, in our booty and our thighs. That's called femoral fat. The fat around the midsection is very metabolically active and it can cause problems. It has these little molecules called cytokines, and it just causes havoc with our overall metabolism. You're beautifully designed, you're perfectly engineered, and your body will respond the way the way you treat it. And so if you start treating yourself right, these numbers will all improve. These are all things that we can impact. And if you do everything you can and they're still out of range, talk to your healthcare provider about medication. Don't try to be King Kong. Make sure, whether it be your blood pressure, your triglycerides, any of these things, especially your glucose, pay attention. Of these five, it's the blood glucose. That's the tail that wags the dog. That's very, very important. So I'm going to give you 3 pillars, and they're not surprising, by the way. The first pillar is to improve and increase your physical activity, because your fitness level is critical. The 150 number, I want you to remember that. That's 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week. Okay, so that's brisk walking per week. Remember, we've got 24 hours in a day. We have 7 days in a week. It's 168 hours. 150 is less than 3 of those. So if you were to say, what is the number one thing I can do to improve my health? It would be to walk the dog, even if you don't have one. Now, if you want to be more intense in your activity, if you want to cycle or run or swim, that's okay. You can cut that 150 number in half to 75 minutes per week. These are actually the federal physical activity guidelines, and they're based on years and years of research. That's what we know. More than 50% of Americans are getting no physical activity at all. Don't be in that category. I'm going to show you why. So obviously, the past year and a half, our life has changed. March of 2020, from my standpoint, a defining point in our life moving forward. I don't think life will ever be the same. And it's not just the virus, it's a number of other things as well. But let's talk about what we've learned in the past year and a half. When we hear about people that catch the virus and go into the hospital, or people that go into the hospital and don't come out of the hospital, we usually see that data. We've been seeing it every day in your city or your county, state, and nationally, and then globally. Usually what we hear is all had underlying health risk conditions, all but one. If whatever group you look at, they basically had underlying health risk conditions. So let's take a look at those, because they're not all created equal. A big study that was done by Kaiser Permanente earlier this year looked at a big population of almost 50,000 men and women, and they ranked the underlying health conditions. And you look at this list, and you're probably thinking, I wonder which one is the most important. Which one would elevate your odds of A, catching the virus, and B, succumbing to the virus? And believe it or not, the number one answer is, are you an organ recipient? Do you have someone else's heart or lungs? That does not bode well in terms of being able to take a punch, so to speak. Remember, Mike Tyson used to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, if we get punched in the mouth with the COVID virus, are we going to be able to weather that? And we know that an organ recipient is going to have a challenge. Number 2 on the list is not a surprise at all. Age. Obviously, usually younger people are healthier than older people. There are exceptions to the rule, but by and large, that's what we're seeing with all the data to reinforce that. But these two are what I would define as non-modifiable risk factors. You can't change them, right? We can't change our age. We can't change if we've already had an organ transplant. The other 8, though, are modifiable. And if you rank those, which one was the most predictive of you catching the virus and then succumbing to the virus, believe it or not, it was physical inactivity. Now, don't get me wrong. The others are very important. Diabetes, smoking, obesity, all of these things, very critical. But this is the one thing that it floats to the top of that list, that if you want to be able to be vital and strong and be able to take a punch, improve your fitness. The data supports it. There was a Scottish philosopher a couple hundred years ago named David Hume. He used to say, a wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. This is the evidence. And let me show you, this is not just about COVID, by the way, and it's not just one study. This study came out in JAMA a couple of years ago, looking at a huge population of over 120,000 men and women. Now, at first, this may be a little bit daunting, but bear with me here, because this is important. Over on the left, you see survival probability. That basically means, are you going to be able to stay alive? And across the bottom, you see time in years. So in the bottom left, let's say we're all starting today at 0. And then we go up and you see that survivability, where all 100% of us are going to survive today, most likely. There may be an exception or two, hopefully not. But over the course of time, they looked at 5 different categories of fitness, objectively measured, not just asking somebody their fitness level, measuring it with a treadmill test. And you see there in the box, you see the 5 buckets, so to speak, of fitness. You got the lower 20%, and then below average is the next 20%, and it goes up to above average, high, and elite. So the elite athletes, the real crazy over the top, hyper fit people. And then at the bottom, you have couch potatoes. And look at what happens. Go over to 10 years and then look up there on the right side. Look at that enormous gap between that gray line on the bottom, low fit, compared to the next line, which is below average. This is really important to recognize. If you want a tremendous return on your investment, you need to just get off the couch. You need to walk the dog, even if you don't have one. Just by going up 1 block on the fitness level, your survivability goes way up. Now, you do get additional benefit by improving your fitness and going up that ladder. But comparatively speaking, your great payoff is just avoiding physical inactivity. There are hundreds of studies to support this. I spent 14 years here in Dallas as a senior executive at the Cooper Aerobic Center. The Institute at the Aerobic Center houses the largest database on physical activity in the world. They've published over 600 papers in the past 20 years, and it all reinforces what we're looking at right here. We were born to move. We were engineered beautifully to run and jump and fall and dance, play, do all of the things that we did as children. I encourage you to find a way to get more of that back into your life. The more, the better. Get outside, get some fresh air, a little vitamin D, just, wave to a neighbor, go for a walk. All of these things, we can control these things, and they're going to tremendously impact your future. Really important to recognize. The second pillar, again, not surprising, food, nutrition. Pardon my French, but we need to cut the crap. If people say that nutrition is complicated, it is not. It really is not. We just have to pay attention and put good fuel in our gas tank. Whether you're a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or a Bugatti, however you want to view yourself, choose to put quality fuel in the gas tank. Not this kind of stuff, this kind of stuff. Now, I spend a lot of time researching this, a lot of reading, a lot of lectures, a lot of conferences. I can tell you that when you look at the literature, there is not one way to eat right. I do know that there's a whole bunch of people that are going to try to convince you otherwise, but it's not necessarily keto. It's not Atkins. It's not high fat. It's not low fat. There's a number of ways to eat, but it boils down to starting with the quality of the fuel that you're putting in your gas tank. In general, when you look at the literature, the Mediterranean diet, which is not a diet at all, it's a lifestyle, is a great way for you to fuel your gas tank, right? So you're looking at food here. It's not man-made artificial substances. This is food. You see some fish, you see nuts, you see fruits and vegetables, a little bit of olive oil. What you don't see is maybe a glass of red wine, the way they eat over, or at least they used to eat before Western civilization kicked in. This is just food. And so that's a great place for you to start, is by making proper choices. And again, you're making these choices, right? No one is putting a gun to your head and says you have to have a double bacon cheeseburger, biggie size the fries, and oh, by the way, give me a Diet Coke, as if that's going to make a big difference, right? These are all choices. Now, again, I'm not saying you have to be perfect all the time. You don't, but you need to, again, understand that if your future is important to you and how you feel and how you perform is important, these are things that we can do. It's all about habits. A habit is something you do without thinking about it. like tying your shoes or brushing your teeth, putting on your seatbelt. Health is all about habits. So figure out ways to intentionally build healthy habits. The third pillar is sleep. Now, this is the one that most people statistically compromise on. That number 7 is your line in the sand. 7 hours, at least 7 hours of sleep per night, quality sleep. Now, you may need more, and that would be fine, but try not to get less than that because sleep is really fundamental to everything. Yes, you can get by on less sleep, but you're not going to flourish. You're not going to thrive. You're not going to be optimal. And that's really what we should be striving for, right? So I'm going to do a quick quiz for you, and you don't have to raise your hand or vote online unless you want to. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, yes or no. Just do your own kind of self-inventory. Does a warm room, boring meeting or lecture, heavy meal, or low dose of alcohol make you drowsy? Number 2, do you fall asleep within 5 minutes of getting into bed? Or are you asleep before the plane even taxis to the runway? Do you need an alarm clock to wake you up? Number 4, do you hit the snooze bar repeatedly? Number 5, do you sleep extra hours on the weekend? Now, according to Dr. James Moss, one of the leading sleep gurus in our country, he was a professor at Cornell for 48 years. Dr. Moss says if you answered yes to one or more of these questions, then you are by definition sleep deprived. So there's an opportunity to improve your health and overall well-being, not only for tomorrow, but for the rest of your life, if you can find a way to develop healthy habits around sleep. These are the things that are all related to high quality sleep. You're lowering your risk of disease, you're improving your immunity above the neck, so important. It's very related to weight, by the way, because when you're sleep deprived, that increases your stress level, which increases cortisol, which increases your likelihood to add weight and keep that weight on. So all of these things are important. And what we have to do is focus on what's called our sleep hygiene. That's our habits around sleep. And at the top of that list is going to be the understanding that you have one biological clock. You don't have 2. You don't have a Monday through Friday clock and a Saturday, Sunday clock. Being consistent over the course of time is really important. One of the best things you can do is to identify a 1-hour window where you go to bed every night, Monday through Sunday, and then another 1-hour window of when you get up, and trying to be consistent. It's going to be very difficult to catch up on the weekend. You're going to be in a constant stage of basically jet lag, and you don't want to be there. So be consistent with your time going to bed and time getting up in the morning. You got to create the right environment, right? It's got to be like a cave. It's got to be dark, and it's got to be quiet. And we have to eliminate technology, get rid of all of the bells and the whistles and the lights and everything else. If you want to, put your phone in another room. Don't let technology impact something that is so important for you. It's got to be dark, it's got to be quiet, and it's got to be cool, because our bodies, our core temperature comes down when we're sleeping. And so you've got it not 74 degrees. The ideal, according to the research, the ideal temperature for quality sleep is 65 to 67 degrees. Now, I do this enough. I know many times couples in person, they'll be elbowing one another. See, I told you, women generally like it, a little bit cooler than the guys. And so it's a constant tug of war. But this is what the science says. Also, don't spend a lot of time trying to get to sleep, or if you wake up in the middle of the night trying to get back to sleep. If you can't do that in about 10 or 15 minutes, get up and go into a different room. Don't turn on The Blacklist or read a Stephen King novel, but do something that will just kind of take your mind away from whatever it is you're probably wrapped around the axle on. Maybe do a crossword puzzle, maybe do Sudoku or whatever. Just kind of get your mind away and then go back and give it another shot. Don't just lay there and ruminate. And also understand that there are certain things that are going to impact the quality of your sleep. Obviously, caffeine, not just in coffee and tea, but in all the energy drinks and all sorts of other things. Caffeine works. That's why people oftentimes will drink it. But if you're caffeine sensitive and you're having trouble getting to sleep at night, maybe cut off your caffeine at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Pretty good strategy. Now, alcohol will help you get to sleep. We know that, but it's going to tremendously impact the quality of your sleep, your deep sleep, your REM sleep, And there is what's called a dose response. The more the alcohol, the bigger the impact. And so I'm not saying don't drink. I'm just saying be mindful of it, that if you're having trouble sleeping, it's really gonna have a dramatic effect on all sorts of markers that we can measure. Your core temperature, your respiration, your heart rate, something called heart rate variability, and the intensity of your sleep. So all of those things are going to be impacted. So be mindful of that. Again, just understand you're in charge. You make the choices. All right. So when we talk about being intentional, set those goals, figure out what the big picture is, right? Take an inventory, i.e. get a physical, and have a candid conversation with your provider around metabolic syndrome, and find out what else that you can be working on, and then prioritize physical activity, nutrition, and sleep. Okay, let's go to the second pillar. We need to connect the mind and the body. And I believe that people have always kind of understood this, but I truly believe that in the past 18 months, now we really understand it, right? We hear a lot about emotional health and stress and uncertainty. These are feelings that we're human, right? We all have feelings, and that's a good thing. But when you're driving on overdrive all the time and you're not really sure about the future, if you work in education, again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. You know, are we going to go back into the classroom? Or are we going to do a hybrid? What about all these other topics that are driving a lot of folks crazy around masks or CRT or what? I mean, this is the world that we're in. We've got to recognize that we have to take care of both our body and our mind. Okay, so this is the physical impact of the past year and a half. We know that 42% of adults have gained unwanted weight. The average weight gain has been about 29 pounds. And keeping in mind that going into the pandemic, we had about a 42% rate of obesity in the United States. So this has been accelerated. 81% of people have developed unhealthy habits. Well, what does that mean? Alcohol consumption, substance use, smoking or vaping, social media, physical activity, emotional eating, all of these things have been impacted as a result of the pandemic, because our whole schedule, our whole lifestyle, everything about our world has been turned upside down. And this is the way life works quite often, right? We all have a series of ebbs and flows. It's hills and valleys. It's never a straight line. What has happened, though, in the past year and a half is that we all, on the face of the earth, basically got punched in March of 2020 at the same time. We're all in the same storm, but we're also all in different boats. I think that's important to recognize. So again, do a little inventory here. How are you doing on these things? Has the past year and a half impacted your behavior and your habits? But it's also had a big impact on our mental and emotional health, for sure. 41% of US adults in the middle of last year said that they have experienced anxiety or depression, compared to 11% pre-pandemic. And then 75% of folks said that they could have certainly used some additional emotional support. So if you're in this category, you're not the Lone Ranger. It's okay. By the way, it's okay not to feel okay. Don't try to pretend otherwise. You're not the Lone Ranger. It is okay not to be okay. We need to acknowledge that. So this is interesting, and this is based on the research. Big study here that was published in the Archives of General Psychiatry. 58% of people with depression have an increased risk, or it increases your risk of developing obesity. Conversely, 55% of people in the obese category have an increased risk of developing depression. So one influences the other. This is known as bidirectional. So this is why I want to encourage you to remember the head and the body are connected. So don't just think about treating one without the other. You are not two islands. You're an entity. You're all connected. Don't just treat the number on the scale. Don't just treat what's going on in your head. Really think about yourself as, what can I do to maximize and optimize my overall health? We've been hearing a lot about even elite athletes, world champion gold medalists, professional athletes that are really truly understanding, despite the fact that, you know, they on the surface may quote unquote have it all, that the pressure of what's going on in our world today, and I truly believe that a lot of it is influenced by this little device and social media, it's having a big impact. So again, take a step back, take an inventory, and figure out how you're doing. A great tool is what we use with our organization we call RAIN, R-A-I-N. That's an acronym. Number one, the R, recognize admit that something's going on. This is just kind of weird. I'm behaving differently than I'm accustomed to. Maybe I'm more short-tempered. Maybe I'm snapping at the kids or my spouse or whatever. How am I behaving? Just recognize it. And then A is accept it. Again, it's okay. Just accept it, because this is the nature of what we're dealing with right now. It is a very unique environment and it's changing all the time. Accept that. And then I is investigate it. Kind of figure out, how is that manifesting? Is it impacting my sleep? Is it impacting my behavior, my attitude, my overall physical health, or what is happening here? Just kind of take the time to recognize what's happening and investigate that a little bit. And then the end is the most important, and that's nurture. It's really important to be able to invest in yourself. Again, it is not selfish at all. It's the antithesis of being selfish. If you're a person that cares about others, and especially, and this is through experience, I've done this for a long time, many times certain groups of people, mothers, nurses, teachers, they're givers, they're nurturers, and they're very focused on the health and welfare of others, which is awesome. But the reality is, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're taking notes, I encourage you to write that down. You can't pour from an empty cup. You need to recognize that you've got to take care of you. Self-care is vital, and that you have to figure out is best for you. In fact, we call it in our program, we refer to it as your vital needs. What are your vital needs? And if they're not being met, then the odds are then something may be going haywire. So it could be quiet time. It could be travel. It could be physical activity. It could be music. Find what it could be, a bath or a massage, whatever it is that just take time for you. That's okay. Remember RAIN. All right. The other thing is, don't be afraid to ask for help. This is so critical, especially what we're finding and looking at the literature. Younger people are having a really tough time with the past year and a half. Those in the 18 to 24-year-old category really having a tough time. I believe, and I can't validate it yet, but I believe a lot of it has to do with the fact that they don't have life experiences. They haven't necessarily been knocked down before. You know, that old adage, you get knocked down 8 times, you get up 9. You brush yourself off and go, all right, let's go. But kids many times have not had that experience. And now they're whether it be in high school or college, and they're trying to figure out what does the future look like for them. That's tough, but it doesn't mean it's not tough for you either, right? So don't be afraid to ask for help. That can be a professional help with a counselor. If many times your employer hopefully has embedded in the program something called an EAP, which is an employee assistance program. It could be someone, from a faith-based organization, like a pastor or minister, a rabbi. Find somebody that you can talk to and walk through these things. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Something that has been really valuable for me, I can't overemphasize this, is what I call ALF, A-L-F, and that stands for at least 5. And I started it a little before the pandemic, but man alive, it's been super valuable. That means that every morning when I get up, I protect at least my first 5 minutes. Now, sometimes it's more like 15 or 30, but I am very protective of making sure that I don't turn this on. I don't look at Twitter. I don't look at Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or whatever. I don't look at it at all. No emails. I don't turn on the TV. I don't look at the newspaper. I'm a dinosaur. I still take a newspaper. But the reality is, I grab a cup of coffee or tea and I sit down and I just think. I think about the things that I have in my life that I appreciate, that I'm grateful for. I think about the way I want my day to go. What I don't want to happen is some algorithm or some bot, some stranger creating a headline that's going to get me wrapped around the axle and trigger me so that I'm coming out of the gate twisted. I don't want to be triggered to start my day, because it sets your day up for disaster. You want to avoid what's called anticipatory anxiety. And what this means is that if you start your day every day just right out of the gate, just kind of tense and angry, it means it's going to start, the brain is going to adapt, and it's going to start anticipating that that's the way you normally wake up, and it's going to impact the last 2 or 3 hours of your sleep. So your quality of sleep, your ability to get into REM sleep or deep sleep is going to go down. You don't want that to happen. So start your day in a very positive way. And if you don't think that this phone has an impact on how you feel and how you think. I encourage you, if you haven't already seen it, to watch the Netflix documentary. It's called The Social Dilemma. It will blow your mind. And the reality is it has a lot more impact than I think most of us want to admit. So try this. It's free. No one even needs to know, but try ALF tomorrow morning and see if it doesn't have some benefit for you. So in summary, in this mind, connecting the mind and body, acknowledge the connection. Remember, you can't treat one without the other. Be sure to nurture yourself. That's okay. It should be really, really important. It's not being selfish. And then seek help if needed. Okay. So now we're going to pivot now to that third pillar, which is be resilient. Now, I honestly believe that this may be the most important of all. So I saved it for last, but being able to be resilient is critical. Psychologists define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. Does that seem to define the past year and a half for us? For the most part, it's been tough. It's been really hard. I picked this picture intentionally. This is what's called the Lone Cypress in Carmel, California, in Northern California, on the 17-mile drive. It's very famous for years and years and decades for being able to weather lots and lots of storms. Whatever life brings to that tree, it seems to weather that storm. And that's what we should be doing. And resilience, I'm talking again about physical and emotional resilience, really important. So when we talk about mental health, it's a spectrum, right? It's a continuum. It's not binary. It's not either or, yes or no. We all kind of ebb and flow, right? We have good days and bad days. But for the most part, where we really like to be is over here, what's known as flourishing. I have a real true sense of meaning. I have a mastery of my domain, so to speak. I kind of have control of my scene. And I have a meaningful life and I matter to others. Again, we're not islands. We are social animals. We are hardwired to connect. And when you're flourishing, all of these things, life is good. You feel great. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there's depression, right? And those numbers have been rising pretty significantly since the pandemic. Folks that are despondent, they feel constantly drained, and they feel a sense of worthlessness. So again, this is a spectrum. But what we're learning now, and the research supports this, is that there's this area in the middle. You're not doing cartwheels, but you're not, feeling like jumping off a building either. You're kind of in between, and that's called languishing. Now, what does that mean? What does languishing mean? Well, it means you're indifferent to your indifference. You just don't really have that zest for life, and you don't really care too much. You're not functioning at full capacity at all. This disrupts your ability to focus. It also tremendously impacts your productivity at work. In fact, people that are languishing are 3 times more likely to cut back on their workload and what they're accomplishing. And probably if you just wanted one word to describe languishing, I would say, meh. Hey, how you doing? Meh. So that's important. How do you counter that? Well, you find your flow. That's your assignment today. I want you to think about finding your flow. What is flow? Well, often referred to as being in the zone. I'm just in this state where I just am in the zone. You hear athletes talk about that many times, like in basketball, a shooter is in the zone and everything just feels right. You're hitting on all cylinders. It's where challenge meets skill. So it's not too easy. It's not too hard. It's kind of pushing you just a little bit. It's a just manageable difficulty. It will stretch your skills and heighten your resolve. And oftentimes you just get into this, it's almost timeless. You get into this rhythm or this groove and you're just doing it. You go, oh my gosh, I had no idea that 3 hours had passed. You can find flow at work many times as well. If you have that career, that opportunity or something, that project where you just are in flow. So one of the things that will help you get out of that state of languishing is to find your flow. Now it's going to be different for all of us. For Todd, it's right here. It's wake surfing. I clearly have 2 addictions that I have no intention of correcting. One is basketball and the other is flow. I started doing this 3 years ago. I'm extremely fortunate. I have 2 neighbors that have boats and I have a lake about 10 minutes from my house here in North Texas. And so any chance I get, if I can go out and wake surf, it is amazing. If I start my morning on the lake wake surfing, you can't pull me off sides. It doesn't matter what happens the rest of the day. I'm in a really good place. I've got another buddy, his flow is fly fishing. Another one is disc golf. It can be all sorts of things. It could be music. It could be whatever it is for you. Be intentional about that. Try to figure out what your flow is and find that, because it's going to help elevate kind of how you feel, what I like to say, how you show up. Very, very important. And by the way, you're not always successful. In a flow state, you don't win all the time, believe me. And so the good thing about wake surfing is you're only going 10 miles an hour. It's unlike wakeboarding or water skiing. So it's not a car wreck. You just get wet. So that's not a problem. I'm a quote guy. You probably have already figured that out. I think the most important quote that I can ever imagine that summarizes kind of a motto or a mantra for life. Epictetus, about 2,000 years ago, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that's exactly what happens each and every day. It's what happened to all of us in March of 2020. But it's really, when you think about it, every day. I've told my kids for years, you get up in the morning, you're in the shower, you're thinking, this is the way my day is going to go. Boom, 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 boom. It never goes like that, ever. How do you react to it? That's critical. You're in charge of that. And if you're taking care of yourself and being intentional and mindful, you're going to be able to manage those curveballs an awful lot better. It's all about being resilient, right? Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So what happens when you get punched? How do you build resilience? Number one is, and this is not going to surprise you probably coming from me, build your fitness, improve your fitness. Thousands, literally thousands of articles, scientific research papers that will talk about the importance of your physical and your emotional health and your ability to manage and really increase your resilience. Accept and anticipate change. It's coming. It is. We don't know when, where, how, why. It's going to come. Anticipate it. Be hopeful. This is a choice. You know, the way we think, the way we approach life, the way we look into the future, be hopeful. It makes a difference. Build a community of support. This is so critical. Again, it's been really tough for a lot of people during pandemic, being isolated, working from home. Isolation, believe it or not, according to the research, from a health perspective, it's been documented that it's the equivalent of being lonely and isolated is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Be intentional, reach out, connect in person if it's safe and appropriate, but through technology, any way you can make it happen, connect with others. Don't be an island, and be grateful. Again, this is so important. You've probably read or heard a lot about this, being intentionally grateful. So how do you become grateful? It's simple. You practice gratitude. That's one of the things that I do in that 5 minutes every morning during my ALF period. I am very intentional about thinking about who and what I'm grateful for. It's super easy to focus on what you don't have or the problems or the speed bumps. Not going to do you a ton of good. If you do focus, however, on what you're grateful for, wow, it makes a difference. Again, you start your day in a very positive way. It doesn't mean that things aren't going to come up and happen, but by practicing gratitude, possibly journaling, maybe first thing in the morning and last thing at night before you go to, before you lay down, it changes everything. It's going to change your overall well-being and outlook. And I think those around you are going to notice it as well. So practice gratitude. This is David Roust. He's a 93-year-old Benedictine monk. And he likes to say that it's not joy that makes us grateful. It's gratitude that makes us joyful. And I think that is absolutely true, without a shadow of a doubt. So in terms of building your resilience, focus on flourishing. Do what you can to flourish. You can do that by finding your flow and then practice gratitude. Be grateful for what you have. Look around and recognize that there's a lot of people that are really, really struggling and having difficult times. Figure out a way potentially that you might be able to help them, support them. That will help them. It will help you. Sometimes it's just an email, a text, a quick phone call, a lunch, whatever. Try to, I firmly believe that we're all on this earth for a reason, and that's to have a positive impact on other people. And it's not a dress rehearsal. There's no guarantees in any of this. We've learned that for sure the past year and a half. So being able to really be intentional about how you approach life and what you want down as you look downstream is going to be very important. So I'm going to close real quick. I want to make sure I'm doing just fine on time. These are my kids. This is Andrew on the left, Lauren on the right. This picture was taken about 1992. We were living on the East Coast and they were standing there looking out at that sailboat. And every time I see this picture, it just brings joy to my heart. As I mentioned, I was an only child. I always wanted a sibling, especially an older brother. That wasn't in the cards, but it was so important for me to be able to be a part of their life and watch this. But, and again, I don't know many of you or any of you on this call actually, but statistically, I can tell you that I probably have a head start on most of you. And so when I think about life, when I think about this opportunity that we have, I want to encourage you that it happens fast. It happens really quick, because I can remember this day, and it wasn't too long, just a couple months ago, that this picture was taken. And this is really, for me, when I think about my flow, when I think about my why, when I think about priorities and being intentional, it's my daughter Lauren on the left in the dark blue with my son-in-law Scott. And then on the right is my son Andrew in the dark blue shirt with his wife, who's also named Lauren. It's very complicated, and their little girl Stella. So Lauren and Scott have 4 kids. Andrew and Lauren are catching up. But this is, to me, so important that each and every day that I have an opportunity to be with them, to be engaged, to be a part of their life, very, very important. So I don't do the things that I do or make the choices that I make because of my blood pressure. That's great that it's in a good range. It's great that my diet, my cholesterol or my glucose is where it needs to be, or the number on the scale is appropriate, but that's not why. It's really, I get to participate in life and I get to do the things that I believe matters. But again, what's important for me is not necessarily what's important for you. So hopefully some of this today, can kind of put things in perspective. A lot of the things you already are aware of, I encourage you to prioritize them, find a way to make it happen. Walk the dog, even if you don't have one, get some sleep, put good fuel in your Ferrari. Those are all things that we can do that are going to help us tomorrow, help us actually today, tomorrow, and down the road. Okay. Your priorities: be intentional, connect mind and body, and be resilient. If you want to take a picture of that, you can do that. I'm also going to share my deck with Anne so she can share that with you guys if you'd like to be able to share that. If you have any questions or thoughts, you can call me. That's my direct number. It's actually my cell number. So call me anytime you want. And there's my web address or my email address. Wonder Health is an organization that we work with about 800 plus organizations around the country, and we help organizations become healthier, both physically and emotionally. And we work with all sorts of organizations, including a whole bunch of schools and school districts and universities and hospitals and Google and American Airlines. We're pretty good at what we do. So if you're a part of an organization that's interested in collectively improving the health of that organization measurably, we can help you do that. So feel free to reach out. Be glad to share some information on it. But most importantly, I just really, hopefully for you personally, that you can recognize that your health, your future is up to you, and that your ability to positively impact your family, your community, your churches, your schools, it's all in front of us. And so I sincerely hope that you can figure out a way to improve that quality of life and have a long and healthy life moving forward. So thank you for your attention today. We're right on time. And I don't know if we got any, we got 32 chats. Holy cow. Are there some questions in there, Ann?
Well, it wasn't really question. We were kind of chatting, I think all of us had a lot of aha moments. I know I did. And we were kind of chatting a little bit back and forth about when you were doing the sleep, I flunked the sleep test right away, put that out there. And I think there are a couple of people that said, yeah, me too. I mean, it was just very interesting. And gosh, I need to get off now and go for a walk.
Good. I'm all in favor of that. Hey, one thing about sleep that you mentioned, a deal that about 3 or 4 years ago, I started figuring out, if I could figure out a way not to have an alarm clock wake me up, it was a good thing. Now, in order to do that, I have to make sure I go to bed early enough, right? But if you can figure that out, unless I have a plane to catch or a meeting that's critical. I do everything I can to just wake up on my own, and that's been really, really important. So don't, what do I want to say? Don't just take sleep for granted. I know you can get by on less sleep, but really try to prioritize that. I think it's going to make a difference for you.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And my problem is I can get to sleep, but boy, I wake up and then my head gets going. And I liked your suggestion about don't lay there and suffer, because that's what I do. I lay there and suffer. I want to get up and go, do something, or maybe take my elf right at that time, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's absolutely not a bad idea at all.
Yeah.
Sudoku it seems to work for me, but not a 6 on the difficulty level. I can't do a 6. I'll try a 4 or a 5, but not a 6. So don't do that, because that will really, get you going. So, hey, by the way, I'm going to be in Houston for the conference next month. So if anybody is there and wants to come say hi, I'd like to high five you in person. Just come say hi. I can't remember exactly what day I'm speaking, but I'll be down there and I'm excited.
Yep, we're excited to have you there too. And yes, we have a few, I think I have about 10 executive assistants that have registered for the conference. And
Awesome.
I'm excited that we can all get together. So if any of you can go talk to your bosses, talk to your budget folks, and tell them you want to come to Houston in a little, about 3-4 weeks. My gosh, it's sneaking up on us. So we'd love to have you.
Perfect.
So, well, this has been great, Todd. Thanks so much. And like I said, this is kind of our kickoff to more professional development, I'm hoping. And I think it was a great way to start. So I know I learned a lot. I think we all did. And we look forward to more opportunities to get together.
Terrific. Very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
too.